Dreams are fragile. They can be shaken by failure, mocked by doubt, and crushed by circumstances. Many people let their dreams fade when life becomes heavy. But some dreams refuse to die, because the person holding them refuses to quit. This is the story of Joe Ranga. Joe Ranga did not begin with privilege or certainty. His journey started in confusion, struggle, and unanswered questions. Every step forward came with resistance. Every attempt was met with obstacles. Yet Joe learned an important truth early on. Dreams do not die because they are weak. They die when belief disappears. There were moments when giving up seemed easier than continuing. Moments when silence replaced applause and effort went unnoticed. But Joe chose persistence over comfort. While others slept, he worked. While others doubted, he believed. And while the world told him, "Not possible," he told himself, "Not yet." Failure became his teacher, not his enemy. Each setback sharpened his focus. Each loss strengthened his discipline. Joe understood that success is not built in one victory, but in thousands of invisible struggles no one claps for. What makes Joe Ranga different is not luck or talent alone. It is his refusal to surrender his vision. Even when progress was slow, even when results were invisible, his dream stayed alive because his commitment stayed alive. Today, Joe Ranga stands as proof that dreams do not need perfect conditions to survive. They need courage. They need patience. And most of all, they need a heart that refuses to quit. This is not just Joe's story. It is a reminder to anyone who feels tired, delayed, or defeated. If your dream is still breathing inside you, it is not over. Dreams only die when you stop chasing them. Dreams do not disappear because the road is difficult. They disappear when belief slowly fades under pressure. In Joe Ranga's journey, belief was not something he had once and never questioned. It was something he had to rebuild again and again. Every challenge tested his confidence, every delay whispered doubt, and every failure tried to convince him that his dream was unrealistic. Yet, Joe understood that the real danger was not failure itself, but allowing failure to redefine what he believed about himself. There were times when results were invisible and progress felt meaningless. In those moments, belief became an act of courage rather than comfort. Joe chose to trust the process even when the outcome was unclear. He reminded himself that belief is not blind optimism. It is the decision to continue despite uncertainty. When external validation was missing, he learned to validate himself. Belief also meant resisting comparison. Watching others succeed faster could have weakened his confidence, but Joe refused to measure his worth by someone else's timeline. He recognized that every dream moves at its own pace and that rushing faith often leads to regret. Instead of asking, "Why not me?" he asked, "What can I do better today?" Most importantly, Joe protected his belief fiercely. He distanced himself from negativity, ignored discouraging voices, and replaced doubt with disciplined action. Even on days when motivation was low, belief carried him forward. It reminded him that as long as he still believed in his dream, it was still alive, still possible, and still worth fighting for. Struggle is often misunderstood as a sign of failure, but in Joe Ranga's journey, struggle was the starting line. Before progress, before clarity, and before confidence, there was resistance. Life did not open doors easily for Joe. Instead, it challenged him at every step, forcing him to grow stronger before moving forward. These early hardships were not meant to stop him, they were meant to shape him. Joe learned that struggle builds awareness. It reveals weaknesses, exposes habits, and demands discipline. When nothing came easily, he was pushed to develop patience and resilience. Each obstacle forced him to think differently, work smarter, and strengthen his mindset. Rather than seeing struggle as punishment, he began to see it as preparation. There were moments when the weight of difficulty felt overwhelming. Progress was slow, resources were limited, and results were uncertain. Yet, Joe realized that these moments were quietly building his endurance. While success may create confidence, struggle creates character. It teaches a person how to stand firm when the ground feels unstable. Struggle also stripped away illusions. It showed Joe that success is not a sudden breakthrough but a gradual climb filled with setbacks. Every hardship became proof that he was moving forward, not backward. Instead of asking when the struggle would end, he learned to ask what the struggle was teaching him. By accepting struggle as part of the journey, Joe stopped fearing it. He understood that the beginning is often the hardest phase, not because it is impossible but because growth is uncomfortable. And it was within this discomfort that his foundation was built, strong enough to support the dream he refused to abandon. Comfort is seductive. It offers safety, routine, and the illusion of peace. But in Joe Ranga's journey, comfort was the quiet enemy of growth. Every time he chose ease over effort, he risked slowing the dream he was trying to protect. Joe learned early that persistence demands sacrifice, the willingness to stay uncomfortable long after others choose rest. There were countless moments when stopping would have been easier than continuing. Days when exhaustion outweighed motivation, and nights when rest seemed more reasonable than effort. Yet, Joe understood that dreams are not built in moments of convenience. They are built when discipline takes control, when commitment speaks louder than feelings. Persistence for Joe was not about dramatic breakthroughs. It was about showing up repeatedly, even when the work felt repetitive and unrewarding. While comfort encouraged delay, persistence demanded action. Choosing persistence meant waking up with purpose, pushing through doubt and continuing without guarantees. He also recognized that comfort often disguises itself as logic. Excuses like "I'll start tomorrow" or "I'm not ready yet" felt reasonable, but Joe knew they were barriers dressed as patience. By rejecting comfort, he trained himself to act despite fear and uncertainty. Over time, persistence reshaped his identity. It turned effort into habit and resistance into strength. Joe didn't wait for perfect conditions. He moved forward through imperfect ones. By consistently choosing persistence over comfort, he ensured that his dream continued to move, even when progress was slow and the path was heavy. Failure often feels final, like a door slammed shut with no chance of reopening. For many, it becomes a label that defines their limits. But in Joe Ranga's journey, failure was never a verdict. It was a lesson written in experience. Each failure arrived with frustration, disappointment, and self-doubt, yet Joe refused to let it decide who he was or where he would end up. Every setback forced reflection. Instead of asking, "Why did this happen to me?" Joe asked, "What is this trying to show me?" Failure exposed gaps in preparation, weaknesses in strategy, and moments where patience was missing. Rather than denying these truths, he faced them honestly. This willingness to learn transformed failure from something painful into something productive. Joe also learned that failure removes illusions. It strips away false confidence and replaces it with grounded awareness. Success achieved too easily can create arrogance, but failure creates humility. It taught him that growth requires accountability and that improvement begins when excuses end. There were times when repeated failures tested his self-belief. Progress felt delayed and confidence wavered. Yet, Joe understood that failure only becomes permanent when learning stops. Each attempt refined his approach, strengthened his mindset, and clarified his direction. What once felt like loss became guidance. By treating failure as feedback rather than defeat, Joe continued forward with sharper focus and deeper resilience. He no longer feared failing, he feared not trying. And with every lesson absorbed, failure quietly shaped him into someone capable of carrying a dream that demanded endurance, wisdom, and strength. The most powerful work often happens where no one is watching. In Joe Ranga's journey, progress was not announced, celebrated, or immediately recognized. While others waited for applause or external motivation, Joe worked in silence, understanding that real growth does not require an audience. His effort was consistent long before it was visible. There were days filled with routine, repetition, and uncertainty. No praise followed his discipline, and no recognition rewarded his persistence. Yet, Joe knew that success built in silence is stronger than success built for attention. Every quiet hour of effort was laying bricks for a future result that could not be rushed. Silent hard work also demanded emotional strength. It required believing in progress without proof and trusting effort without immediate reward. Joe learned to measure success not by recognition but by improvement. Small, unseen gains slowly accumulated into meaningful advancement. He also understood that loud success often creates the illusion of overnight achievement. What people later called luck was in reality years of unnoticed preparation. While others doubted his pace, Joe respected his process. He focused on mastering his craft rather than showcasing it prematurely. By embracing silence, Joe avoided distraction and comparison. He conserved his energy for growth, not validation. When success finally spoke for itself, it carried weight, because it was built on discipline, patience, and countless moments of unseen effort that never went to waste. One of the greatest obstacles Joe Ranga faced was not failure, but the opinions of others. Dreams often attract doubt before they attract support, and Joe experienced this deeply. People questioned his choices, underestimated his vision, and measured his potential through their own limitations. But Joe learned a critical truth: dreams do not require permission to exist. Seeking approval can slowly weaken conviction. When validation becomes necessary, progress becomes dependent. Joe realized that waiting for encouragement would keep him standing still. Instead, he chose to trust his inner voice over external noise. Even when support was absent, his commitment remained present. There were moments when criticism felt personal and discouraging. Words from others carried weight, especially when repeated. Yet, Joe understood that opinions are shaped by perspective, not possibility. What others couldn't see, he refused to abandon. He stopped explaining his dream to those who were unwilling to understand it. Dreams without approval demand courage. They require the strength to walk alone, to move forward without reassurance, and to continue when belief is questioned. Joe accepted that not everyone would clap at the beginning, and that was okay. His responsibility was not to convince others, but to stay loyal to his vision. By releasing the need for approval, Joe protected his dream from doubt and delay. He focused on action instead of explanation, progress instead of persuasion. And in doing so, he allowed his dream to grow freely, unrestricted by opinion, judgment, or disbelief. Dreams are not sustained by intensity alone. They survive through consistency. In Joe Ranga's journey, it was not one powerful moment or a single burst of motivation that kept his dream alive, but the quiet discipline of showing up every day. He understood that inspiration fades, but consistent effort creates momentum. There were days when motivation was high and progress felt rewarding. But there were far more days when energy was low, results were invisible, and doubt crept in. On those days, consistency mattered more than passion. Joe committed to doing the work even when he did not feel inspired, knowing that dreams weaken when effort becomes optional. Consistency also taught patience. Progress did not always come in visible leaps. Often it appeared in small, almost unnoticeable improvements. Joe learned to respect these small steps, understanding that consistency compounds over time. What felt insignificant in the moment was quietly building strength and direction. He stopped chasing perfection and focused on reliability. Missing one step did not define failure, but giving up entirely would. By returning to the process again and again, Joe maintained connection with his dream, even during periods of uncertainty and delay. Through consistency, the dream remained active, present, and growing. Each repeated effort reinforced belief, strengthened discipline, and deepened commitment. By refusing to break his routine, Joe ensured that his dream never faded. It continued to breathe, evolve, and move forward with him. Quitting is often disguised as relief. It promises peace from struggle and freedom from disappointment. In Joe Ranga's journey, the temptation to quit appeared many times, especially when effort outweighed reward and progress felt distant. Yet, Joe came to understand that quitting would cost him something far greater than failure ever could: the chance to become who he was meant to be. Refusing to quit did not mean he was never tired or discouraged. It meant that even in moments of exhaustion, he chose to continue. Some days, that decision was not fueled by confidence, but by responsibility, to his dream, to his past sacrifices, and to the version of himself that refused to give up. Continuing became an act of self-respect. Joe realized that quitting does not erase pain, it only postpones growth. Walking away might have brought temporary comfort, but it would have left lasting regret. By staying in the struggle, he allowed himself to evolve. Each moment of endurance strengthened his resilience and sharpened his purpose. Refusal to quit also redefined success. Success was no longer just an outcome, it was the act of standing firm when walking away felt easier. Every time Joe chose persistence over surrender, he won a battle that no one else could see. Through this unwavering refusal, Joe protected his dream during its most vulnerable moments. When belief weakened, when progress slowed, and when support faded, his decision to continue became the force that carried everything forward. Pain is unavoidable on any meaningful journey, but in Joe Ranga's life, pain became a source of direction rather than destruction. Every disappointment, rejection, and delay carried emotional weight. There were moments when the burden felt unfair and overwhelming, when effort seemed to bring more struggle than reward. Yet, Joe slowly realized that pain was not random, it was shaping his purpose. Pain forced clarity. It made him question why he started and what truly mattered to him. When comfort was stripped away, purpose became sharper. Joe learned that a dream tested by pain becomes more meaningful, because it is no longer based on fantasy but on lived experience. Each difficult moment added depth to his vision. He also understood that pain builds empathy. Struggling taught him patience with himself and understanding toward others walking similar paths. Instead of becoming bitter, he allowed pain to mature him. It strengthened his emotional resilience and grounded his ambition in humility. Pain demanded growth. It pushed Joe to adapt, to become mentally tougher, and to develop inner strength that success alone could never teach. What once felt like a setback became fuel, fuel to continue, to improve, and to move forward with greater awareness. By embracing pain rather than escaping it, Joe transformed hardship into purpose. The very experiences that could have broken him instead refined his direction, deepened his resolve, and strengthened his connection to the dream he refused to let go of. Circumstances are temporary, they shift, change, and often challenge the very foundation of a dream. In Joe Ranga's journey, obstacles were constant. Financial struggles, skepticism from others, and moments of doubt threatened to derail his progress. Yet, Joe learned an essential truth. A strong vision is not determined by external conditions but by the clarity and strength of the dreamer's focus. Joe understood that circumstances can influence speed, but they cannot dictate direction. A lack of resources, unfavorable conditions, or delays did not define the possibility of his dream. They only tested his commitment. While many measure potential by convenience, Joe measured it by persistence and imagination. His vision became a compass, guiding him steadily regardless of the storms around him. He also recognized that circumstances are fleeting, but a vision, once deeply internalized, is enduring. Even when faced with rejection, failure, or criticism, Joe kept the bigger picture in mind. He reminded himself that challenges are temporary, but the dream, if nurtured, can withstand time and adversity. Vision required faith beyond the present. Joe learned to see beyond immediate struggles, imagining what could be rather than focusing on what was. This perspective allowed him to act strategically, plan patiently, and endure moments that might have discouraged others. His vision became the lens through which he interpreted obstacles, not as endings but as stepping stones. By holding tightly to his vision, Joe ensured that no circumstance, no matter how harsh, could extinguish the direction and purpose of his dream. It became the constant anchor in a sea of uncertainty, a guiding force that outlasted temporary setbacks and kept the dream alive through every trial. Every meaningful dream demands sacrifice, and Joe Ranga's journey is a testament to that truth. Success is rarely achieved without giving up something in the present to secure something greater in the future. For Joe, sacrifice was not merely an occasional choice, it was a continuous commitment. He gave up comfort, leisure, and immediate gratification to invest fully in his vision. There were countless nights when sleep was sacrificed for work, when social gatherings were skipped for practice, and when short-term pleasures were exchanged for long-term goals. Joe understood that each small sacrifice was a deposit in the account of his dream. What might have felt like loss in the moment was actually a strategic step toward achievement. Sacrifice also tested his priorities. Life constantly offers distractions, temptations that feel rewarding but pull energy and focus away from the goal. Joe learned to distinguish between what was urgent and what was important. He chose to prioritize long-term impact over short-term comfort, knowing that the dream required his full attention. Moreover, sacrifice shaped character. It demanded discipline, patience, and resilience. Joe realized that giving up a temporary comfort for a lasting vision strengthened not just the dream, but also the person pursuing it. Sacrifice became a teacher, showing him what he truly valued and revealing the depth of his commitment. By embracing sacrifice, Joe built the foundation for achievement. Each choice to forego ease in favor of effort reinforced his resolve, sharpened his focus, and brought him closer to the realization of his dream. Sacrifice was not a burden, it was the bridge that connected struggle to success. No journey toward a dream is linear, and Joe Ranga's path was filled with unexpected twists, setbacks, and challenges that demanded more than sheer will. They required adaptability. Joe learned early that stubbornness alone cannot overcome every obstacle. Flexibility, creativity, and openness to change are equally vital. Obstacles are inevitable, but how one responds to them determines whether they become roadblocks or stepping stones. When faced with sudden setbacks, plans failing, resources disappearing, or opportunities closing, Joe refused to panic. Instead, he analyzed, adjusted, and acted with intention. Adaptability allowed him to see alternative routes, uncover hidden possibilities, and turn potential defeat into advantage. What might have seemed like a dead end to others became a chance for innovation and growth under his approach. Adaptability also demanded humility. Joe had to accept that some methods would not work and that rigid adherence to a single plan could stall progress. He learned to embrace feedback, assess results honestly, and pivot when necessary. Flexibility became a tool that preserved momentum rather than letting circumstances dictate outcomes. Beyond strategy, adaptability shaped mindset. It allowed Joe to remain optimistic in uncertainty, to remain persistent in the face of changing conditions, and to maintain focus on his ultimate vision without being derailed by temporary disruptions. Challenges became exercises in problem-solving rather than sources of despair. By mastering adaptability, Joe transformed obstacles into opportunities for learning, growth, and innovation. Each adjustment reinforced his resilience, sharpened his creativity, and ensured that even in unpredictable situations, his dream continued moving forward, stronger and more refined than before. Patience is often undervalued in a world that celebrates speed, instant results, and overnight success. Yet, in Joe Ranga's journey, patience proved to be one of his most powerful tools. He quickly realized that meaningful dreams are rarely achieved through impulsive action or hurried decisions. True progress requires time, perseverance, and the ability to wait while continuing to work steadily toward a goal. Joe encountered moments when results seemed slow, and progress appeared invisible. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and yet the visible signs of achievement were minimal. Many would have grown frustrated or disheartened, but Joe understood that patience was not passive, it was active endurance. It meant continuing effort consistently while trusting that the work would bear fruit in its own time. Patience also cultivated perspective. Instead of being consumed by immediate outcomes, Joe focused on long-term growth and learning. He measured success by improvement and persistence, rather than by instant recognition. This ability to wait without losing focus strengthened his resolve and clarified his priorities. Moreover, patience taught resilience. Delays, failures, and unforeseen obstacles tested his resolve repeatedly. Rather than giving in to frustration, Joe learned to use time as an ally, allowing setbacks to refine his skills, broaden his understanding, and deepen his strategic approach. By embracing patience as a quiet strength, Joe discovered that dreams thrive not only through effort and vision but also through the ability to endure and persist. Patience became the steady force that kept him moving forward, allowing his ambitions to grow steadily, thoughtfully, and with lasting impact. Courage is more than a moment of bravery, it is the continuous choice to face uncertainty, fear, and opposition without giving in. For Joe Ranga, courage was the invisible engine behind every step of his journey. From the very beginning, the path he chose was filled with doubt, risk, and challenges that could easily have forced him to turn back. Yet, Joe discovered that without courage, even the clearest vision and the hardest work could falter. Courage allowed him to confront fear head-on. Every new challenge, from starting with limited resources to stepping into unknown opportunities, required him to move forward despite anxiety and uncertainty. Joe realized that courage is not the absence of fear, but the willingness to act in spite of it. It also demanded vulnerability. Joe often had to take risks that left him exposed to judgment, failure, and criticism. Standing firm in the face of skepticism required him to trust himself and his vision more than the opinions of others. Courage, in this sense, was deeply connected to self-belief and conviction. Furthermore, courage fueled persistence. When the path was difficult, when others doubted, and when progress seemed impossible, it was courage that prevented him from giving up. It transformed obstacles into opportunities for growth and mistakes into lessons for improvement. Courage also inspired action. Joe learned that ideas alone achieve nothing, they must be acted upon. Each decision to take a step forward, no matter how small, required bravery, and each step reinforced his confidence and momentum. Through courage, Joe turned fear into fuel, hesitation into movement, and uncertainty into progress. It became the silent force that powered every choice, every action, and every breakthrough, proving that bravery is not a one-time event but a daily practice that sustains a dream. Passion is the fire that fuels persistence, and in Joe Ranga's journey, it was the force that kept him moving when obstacles seemed insurmountable. Passion is more than excitement or fleeting enthusiasm. It is a deep, unwavering connection to a goal that makes effort feel necessary rather than optional. For Joe, passion provided the energy to push through long hours, repeated failures, and moments of doubt that would have stopped anyone less committed. Joe discovered that passion is what makes hard work meaningful. Tasks that might seem tedious or exhausting to others became opportunities to grow, learn, and get closer to his vision. This inner drive created resilience, turning moments of struggle into fuel for improvement rather than reasons to quit. Passion gave him a sense of purpose that was bigger than temporary discomfort. Passion also inspired creativity. When faced with limited resources or challenging circumstances, Joe's love for his dream pushed him to find solutions others might overlook. He experimented, adapted, and innovated because his connection to the goal made him unwilling to settle for less. Furthermore, passion is contagious. Joe's dedication motivated those around him, drew support from unexpected places, and helped him build a network of allies who believed in his vision. His enthusiasm became a beacon that attracted opportunities and people aligned with his purpose. Passion sustains persistence because it turns work into devotion. While discipline ensures action, passion ensures that action is purposeful and enduring. For Joe, this deep-seated love for his dream made even the toughest days bearable, the longest journeys meaningful, and every setback a challenge worth overcoming. Visionary thinking is the ability to see beyond the present, to imagine possibilities that others cannot, and to act in ways that transform those possibilities into reality. In Joe Ranga's journey, this kind of thinking was essential. While many people see limits, obstacles, or the status quo, Joe trained his mind to see opportunity, potential, and a path forward even in the most challenging circumstances. Visionary thinking allowed Joe to anticipate challenges before they became insurmountable. He learned to plan strategically, set long-term goals, and prepare for scenarios that others might overlook. Instead of reacting impulsively to setbacks, he approached each obstacle with foresight, turning potential roadblocks into stepping stones. This mindset also fueled innovation. Joe refused to accept, "This is how it's done," as a final answer. He questioned conventions, experimented with new methods, and imagined solutions that others might consider impossible. His vision allowed him to think beyond immediate limitations and seek creative approaches that expanded his opportunities. Visionary thinking requires courage, because imagining beyond the present often invites doubt, criticism, and misunderstanding. Joe had to believe in what others could not see yet. He learned to trust his intuition, rely on his experience, and commit to a direction even when the path was unclear. Finally, visionary thinking created resilience. By keeping his eyes on a larger goal, Joe could endure temporary setbacks without losing focus. He understood that short-term struggles were part of a bigger picture, and this perspective kept him motivated, patient, and determined. Through visionary thinking, Joe Ranga transcended limitations, turned imagination into action, and ensured that his dream was guided by foresight, creativity, and unwavering focus. Self-belief is the cornerstone of every great achievement, and in Joe Ranga's journey, it became the foundation upon which all progress was built. From the beginning, Joe faced doubt, from others and sometimes even from himself. Circumstances tested him, failures challenged him, and skepticism threatened to shake his confidence. Yet, he learned that true self-belief is not fleeting or dependent on external validation. It is cultivated, strengthened, and defended like a sacred trust. Joe realized that believing in himself meant trusting his abilities, his decisions, and his vision, even when the results were not immediately visible. It meant having faith in his potential when others questioned it, and choosing persistence over resignation. Self-belief became a shield, protecting him from discouragement and negativity. This belief also demanded accountability. Joe could not rely solely on confidence. He had to match it with action. Every step taken, every hour invested, and every lesson learned reinforced his sense of capability. By consistently showing up for himself, he made his belief tangible rather than theoretical. Self-belief transformed challenges into opportunities. When doors closed, Joe trusted that his skill, creativity, and determination could find another path. When mistakes happened, he trusted his ability to recover and improve. Even when surrounded by doubt, he maintained an inner voice of conviction that kept him moving forward. Ultimately, unshakable self-belief gave Joe the courage to dream bigger, take risks, and endure hardship. It was the silent engine that powered every choice, every effort, and every breakthrough, ensuring that no obstacle could extinguish his commitment to the vision he held for himself. Resilience is the power to recover, adapt, and grow stronger after every setback, and in Joe Ranga's journey, it became one of his defining traits. Life is unpredictable, and the path to a dream is rarely smooth. Joe faced failures, rejections, and obstacles that could have easily ended his pursuit. But instead of letting these challenges define him, he learned to respond with resilience, a combination of mental strength, emotional endurance, and unwavering determination. Resilience allowed Joe to view setbacks not as failures, but as temporary detours. Every closed door, every missed opportunity, and every mistake was a chance to learn, reflect, and come back smarter. He understood that life would test him repeatedly, and that enduring these tests was essential to building lasting success. It also demanded adaptability and patience. Joe realized that bouncing back was not about rushing forward blindly, but about assessing the situation, learning from it, and carefully planning the next step. Each setback became a classroom, teaching him lessons about strategy, timing, and persistence that no smooth journey could provide. Resilience strengthened his mindset. Challenges that might have crushed others became exercises in mental fortitude for Joe. He developed an inner confidence that failure was temporary, obstacles were surmountable, and progress was possible as long as he refused to surrender. Moreover, resilience turned pain into fuel. Difficult experiences sharpened his focus, tested his limits, and deepened his commitment. With every comeback, Joe proved to himself, and to the world, that setbacks were not the end of the story, but the starting point for an even stronger chapter of growth and achievement. Through resilience, Joe Ranga transformed adversity into opportunity, proving that the ability to endure, adapt, and rise again is not just a trait. It is the ultimate key to turning dreams into reality. Discipline is the bridge between dreams and reality, and in Joe Ranga's journey, it became the invisible force guiding every step he took. Dreams alone are fragile. Without consistent effort and structured action, even the strongest vision can fade. Joe understood early that talent, passion, and ambition would only carry him so far. Discipline was what transformed potential into tangible achievement. Discipline meant showing up every day regardless of mood, energy, or external recognition. It required commitment to a routine, persistence in the face of distractions, and the courage to prioritize long-term goals over immediate gratification. Joe knew that consistency, repeated over time, was more powerful than sporadic bursts of effort fueled by motivation alone. It also demanded self-control. Joe faced countless temptations, shortcuts, excuses, and moments when comfort could have easily replaced effort. Discipline was his way of resisting these distractions and staying aligned with his vision. Each decision to act deliberately reinforced his habits, strengthened his character, and brought him closer to the dream he refused to abandon. Moreover, discipline cultivated focus. By committing to specific actions and measurable goals, Joe prevented chaos from slowing him down. He learned to break large challenges into manageable steps, tackle them with precision, and maintain momentum even when results were not immediately visible. Through discipline, Joe shaped his own destiny. It provided structure amidst uncertainty, control amidst chaos, and a consistent path forward when the journey felt long and arduous. Discipline turned intention into action, struggle into progress, and dreams into reality, proving that the future belongs to those willing to commit, persist, and act with unwavering consistency. Joe Ranga's journey teaches us a powerful truth. Dreams do not die because the road is hard, because failures happen, or because doubt surrounds us. Dreams live as long as belief, courage, persistence, and hope remain alive within us. Every struggle, sacrifice, and setback is not a reason to quit. It is a stepping stone toward growth, strength, and eventual success. His story reminds us that the journey is just as important as the destination. It is the lessons learned, the character built, and the resilience developed that make the achievement meaningful. Joe's life proves that greatness is not born from ease or luck, but from the relentless commitment to move forward, even when the world says stop. So, let us carry Joe's example in our hearts, to work quietly but persistently, to believe in ourselves when no one else does, to embrace failure as a teacher, and to let hope, discipline, and vision guide every step. Because when we refuse to quit, when we nurture our dreams with patience, courage, and dedication, we don't just chase success. We create a legacy that inspires others and transforms the impossible into reality.